Hello everyone, my name is SiC and welcome to another painting tutorial. Now, I did a short series on a model that I painted before. That turned out to be a really long series, so today we're going to focus on something that is a little bit faster and a little bit quicker, and that is the Fenrisian Wolves, because I of course collect a Space Wolf army, and I bought for my birthday I got a discount basically. I bought a pack of Fenrisian Space Wolves, or Fenrisian Wolves, which is these little guys. Now this one is the one that we're going to be focusing on, but I'm going to do all 5 at the same time. Now, I did customize this one a little bit. As you can see, he has a ripped off arm. Maybe I should focus a little bit less on me, I need to go out of the way. But you can see this guy ripped off a Gene Stealer cultist arm and is now carrying it in his mouth. So we're going to be focusing on this character, but we're going to do all 5 at once because it is the fastest way. So let's begin. So I think it would be most useful to start off with the rocks, because we have to dry brush those quite a bit. And yeah, I think that's going to get in the way of painting the rest of the miniature. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some Mechanica Standard Grey, and we're going to start base coating all the rocks on the foundation of the base. So we're going to give this a good shake. Open it up a little bit. Now I have for myself a wet palette that I built myself. It is basically a plastic tub that is filled with a sponge and water. So of course the sponge soaks up the water, and on top of that I have a layer of baking paper for in the oven paper. And this really helps to keep the paint wet, because the water can go through the baking paper ever so slightly and it keeps the paint wet. As you can see, this little bit of paint there, I used it yesterday or the day before, it is still wet. By now it has thinned down quite a bit, but basically it keeps your paint workable for a lot longer, which is quite nice. Now I have a medium layer brush, which I think is big enough to do the rocks quickly in. We're going to get a little bit of Mechanica Standard Grey. I'm going to thin it down ever so slightly. Actually, this is I have a water pot here, so we're going to get a little tip of water. And we're going to thin that down a little bit, because the baking paper doesn't let through enough water to thin it properly immediately, unless you can see water beads on top of there. Right? And then we're simply going to start base coating really roughly and quickly all of the rocks. Alright, with this now all done, we are going to start layering all over these rocks with Agrax Earthshade, because I want to have it a little bit more of an earthy brown texture to it before we are going to dry brush the rocks. Hopefully that's going to turn out nice, but I have a pretty good feeling about that. I'm not sure yet how it's going to turn out, but we'll see. Actually, I notice I have this rock not completely painted, so I'm going to fix that, but all the other parts we're basically just going to layer the Agrax Earthshade all over. And there's also the added benefit, of course, like if I didn't finish off any of the rocks at the bottom, they're going to have this earthy color there. So that's going to fix itself for the most part. Alright, let's continue like this. Alright, well that is now drying. Everything is completely done on all 5 models. We could wait for this to dry and then dry brush it, but I think a more efficient use of our time is just to continue on base coating the wolf itself. Now I want to go for the example on the box here. So we are going to have a very light brown underbelly with a very dark brown top, with kind of a bit of a transition in the middle, as you can see right there. So what we're going to do is we are going to get some Ushabti bone, and we are going to start layering all over the underbelly and the side of the wolves. And basically I think once we're done with that, the rocks will be dry, and then we can start dry brushing that as well. Alright, so I'm just getting a little bit of paint onto the palette, like so. A little bit of water Now we're going to need a lot more than this, of course, but I think it's best to work in small little parts and pieces, or not pieces, but small parts, sorry, because, well, this does dry out at some point, even with the wet palette. So we're just going to start layering this all over the underbelly and the underside of the wolf, making sure to work it into all of the bristles of the fur. Now I'm going to give this 2 thin coats, and then we're going to continue. Alright, so now this is covered. I covered parts of the face as well as the ears. I did the underbelly and I went up the flanks here a little bit as well. Now I don't have a complete even coverage on the fur parts, but I don't really care about that because fur is not really perfect. You know, there's going to be patches of different colors in there. So that is all going to get fixed when we apply the shade, and it might even lead to some more natural looking fur. However, I did make sure that the legs and the underbelly, where there is less fur, were completely covered in a nice even coat of the Ushabti bone. Now at this point I want to start dry brushing the little rocks that I have over here, and for that I am going to use a small dry brush, and we are going to start off by layering Dawnstone. Right, so we're going to give the pot a good shake, and we're going to take a little bit with the dry brush, and we are going to take this bit of tissue and we're going to work that in amongst the bristles until there is almost nothing left, because we want this to be a pretty subtle effect. So as you can see right now, very little is left on the brush, and we're going to take that model and we're going to start flicking it back and forth across the stone, and you will notice that there is going to be a very gradual, slow build-up of a lighter grey, and this is going to create a very natural looking rock. Now after that we are going to pick an even lighter color, and we are continuing the dry brush a little bit later. So, see you then. Alright, well, that dry brush is now done, and we are continuing on with this quick, very light dry brush of Celestra Grey. So we're basically going to do the same thing, except we're going to do it a lot lighter with a lot less paint, because otherwise it's going to be overpowering, and we're going to try to do this as much as possible on the edges, like the extreme edges. So the edge of the rock and little things like that, so that they stick out a little bit more. This is basically an extreme highlight. I think that's about good. So grabbing this again, you can see there's like a little ridge line along the rock there, so we're going to try to very lightly catch a few areas, so not too much, but just so that it sticks out a little bit more. Same on that rock over here, the rock back there. Yeah, that is starting to become a really nice effect. And again, don't overdo this too much, because it will lose the depth that you have. So very lightly, very carefully pick out some rocks here and there, just like very quickly, just like that. Alright, now I'm going to continue doing this across all the 5 models. Alright, so now the rocks are completely done, and we can move on to the next stage of painting in the fur. Now the reason why dry brushing the rocks at this stage was a good idea is because it's a fairly messy process, and if we happen to get any of the grey on the legs or the lower legs of the wolf, we can easily go back in with a little bit of a Ushabti bone and clean up the mess before moving on. If we had shaded the model, for example, well, it would be a lot harder to fix that mistake with still making it look like a smooth, natural finish. So anyway, we are going to start layering in the colors of brown, and basically when we look back at the pack, you can see it's a very smooth transition into a very dark brown, We are going to attempt to do the same by first taking up a little bit of Baneblade Brown. I'm going to do a little bit of Steel Legion Drab. And finally I'm going to do a little bit of Rhinox Hide along the spine. Now later on we are going to take a shade and we are going to shade almost all over the place, but we're going to take two different shades I think. I think we're going to use a Reichland Flash shade, we are going to, or Seraphim Sepia actually, I think we're going to use that one instead. Seraphim Sepia, and we are going to use Agrax Earth Shade again. And those will blend in quite nicely across the different parts, hopefully. And then a final dry brush of the skin should make sure that all of these colors tie together nicely. Anyway, we are going to take that little bit of Baneblade Brown. I'm going to thin down that little paint, or thin that paint a little bit, I mean. And once we have a nice smooth paint, roughly about this consistency I think, or maybe a little bit more. Yeah, that looks pretty good. We're going to start by painting in the fur just above where we finished with the Uyushapti bone. Right, and we're going to do that along the leg here as well. Basically across the tail, the face. We're going to start going all along this model. Actually all the 5 models of course, because I'm going to try to finish all of them at once. Alright, so I'm going to continue doing this, and I'll see you guys in a moment. Alright, with this now done, it is time to move on to Steel Legion Drab. Now I did try to break up the pattern a little bit so that it's not just a complete straight line, because that will look very unnatural. So along the legs I've went down a little bit. I even attempted here and there a few almost dry brush like strokes, but just because, you know, like the dry brush like strokes would go over the Uyushapti bone. And yeah, just like I said, fur is not perfectly even, so we need to try a little bit to make sure that this fur also is not even, so it has a more natural look. Again, just a little bit of water, and we're just going to continue along the way that we have, this time picking out above this area a little bit more. Along the tail as well, gradually building up the brown colors. Alright, so I'm going to continue doing this, and I'll see you guys in a second. Alright, so that color is now done as well, and we will continue on with Rhinox Hide. And this is just going to be along the very center of the spine. As you can see, this is a very dark color. So we don't want to have too much of that, because it would be a little bit overwhelming. So a little bit of water, thin it down a little bit. And this one is actually quite dark, but we're going to just put this along the ridge line right there. Right all the way to the back. Now this is a color that sticks out quite a bit, but I think we're going to be able to fix that with some shading and highlights at the end, or like the dry brush at the end. So yeah, I'm going to continue doing this, and I'll see you guys in a moment. Alright, with all the main parts of the fur now blocked in, we are going to move on to a shade. Now we're going to start with Seraphim Sepia for all the light parts. So we're going to do the Uyushapti bone and the Baneblade Brown. We're going to do that with Seraphim Sepia, and then we're going to move on to Agrax Earthshade for the darker parts. And we're also doing the Agrax Earthshade a little bit over the Baneblade Brown, trying to get like a bit of a mix going on there. Right, so Seraphim Sepia, give the pot a good shake as usual, and then this step is actually quite easy and a little bit messy. I don't mind too much. We're just going to get a whole big I was going to say spoonfuls, but like a brush full and we're just going to start putting this all over the fur. And of course I'm going to be doing this for all 5 wolves at the same time, and then you'll see me in just a moment when we are going to continue with the Agrax Earthshade. Alright, well actually I only did 1 wolf so far. Shit, that's a bit of a miss on my part, touching the wolf and getting rid of some of the sepia color. But the sepia, Seraphim sepia, is still wet at the moment, and I figured that I would be best served by cleaning the brush and working with this while it's still wet. So I'm going to really make sure that my brush is very clean, and then we're going to switch over to Agrax Earthshade. And basically what I want to do is called a wet blend, I guess. Not entirely sure about the terminology there, but this is still wet, and that means that if I now take this darker color and we're going to start shading the top there, I can get a nice mix going on the miniature itself with these 2 paints, and hopefully that is going to make sure that these blend together well. Maybe even go over the Recepti bone a little bit with this darker color. Now this is really darkening down the model, but that's not too bad actually. Now we're also going to do the face, of course, and I'm going to continue along this model like this and along all the other models as well. And I think, yeah, the blend here at the fur is most important to do immediately. So that's what we're going to do, going over the Recepti bone a little bit. As you can see, I'm going with these things and I'm intermingling them on the model rather than on the palette. Alright, see you guys in a bit. Alright, well, as you can see, it has started blending all the colors together pretty well. Not perfectly yet, but it's getting there, and I think as soon as we start dry brushing, it's going to look a lot better. However, it's not dry yet, so we're going to have to wait a little while longer. However, in the meantime, I think we can start working on the chainsword and the Genestealer arm a little bit, while the shade is drying, because we are not going to touch the shade anymore. So I think what I want to do for the chainsword is I want it to stand out. So I was thinking I was going to make it yellow with Everland Sunset, and then we were going to put some red stripes on it maybe. Not entirely sure about that yet, but that way at least it will really catch the eye. So as always, we are going to give the pot a good shake, and we're going to get a little bit of paint onto our palette. Now for this I'm going to start using a smaller brush, and it's not really the brush people usually use for this kind of stuff, I guess, but this is an extra small Artificer layer brush. That's going to do quite well because we are working with some small details and I don't want to hit the fur, and this is the smallest brush that I have, so it's going to have to do. Right, a little bit of water, thin it down a little bit until we find a nice consistency that is not too runny and too thin, because then you don't really have the pigment anymore. But it should also not be too thick, because when it gets too thick, well, you start clogging up the detail. Anyway, we're going to start putting the yellow all over the housing of the chainsword, all the way down the blade. So I'm going to start working on this. I'll see you guys in a moment. Now, for the leather glove and the grip of the sword, we're going back to Steel Legion Drab. So again, a little bit of paint, thin it down with a little bit of water, and we're going to start applying this all over the leather parts. That includes the grip on the sword, as well as the fingers and of course like the rest of the glove. And again, As with the yellow that I didn't tell you, but which really should speak for itself, we are applying 2 thin coats, as Master Duncan has instructed us. So I'm going to continue doing this. I'll see you guys in a moment. Alright, now the hand guard on the weapon, as well as these 3 little blocks that you see on the top of the blade there, we are going to do with lead belcher. And again, apply some water, thin it down, move on. Now at some point it is a good idea to refill your water, because right now it's already quite dirty because of all the browns and the yellows that I've been using, and yeah, it's just not really good once you start using the brighter colors. You know, having the brown water with a yellow paint really makes the yellow paint also a lot darker than it needs to be, for example. Alright, so I'm going to continue doing all the metal parts on this particular model, and I'll see you guys in a moment. Alright, continuing on, we are going to do the elbow patch, the little bit of elbow armor with a little bit of Celestra Grey. After that we are going to get some, what's the color again? Macragge Blue, which I used on my other Genestealer cultists for the sleeve of the arm. And then we're going to also get some red for the wound, so that it shows up a little bit more. And of course, we're not going to leave the wound just like that. We are going to start using blood for the blood god at the end of the video to really make the blood pop a little bit. And also to do some blood spatter on the wolf, probably, because, well, or at least around his mouth, because he has, of course, ripped off an arm. We might even do some blood on one of the other wolves as well, I'm not sure yet. But this is basically just, yeah, you don't really see it, but it's a very light color gray that we are going to treat with Seraphim Sepia in just a moment. Also need to catch the edges over here, just like that. And that's about it. We're just going to do one layer because it's gray on white. It's not really going to show through all that much, but it just needs to be a little bit darker so it falls in line with the rest of my army. And then we are going to get, like I said, Macragge Blue. Shake the pot again. Get a little bit of paint there. Thin it down just a little bit. Now this is of course an extra step that we don't generally do on the other wolves, but it's nice, and we're going to be, you know, we're going to be as complete as possible in this video because this is my model, and yeah, why not do the whole thing, right? Right, so I'm going to continue making this arm patch, or this little bit of arm, all blue, and I will see you guys in just a moment. Now, for the wound on the arm, we're going to use a little bit of Mephiston red. After this is done, I think we're going to start shading all the different parts on the arm. And after that, I think we're getting very close to having completely dry models that we can start dry brushing, I hope. But for now, just going to put some Mephiston red a little bit randomly in the center of this wound, so that is going to show through. Now we also have various cuts in the arm that would be caused by the fangs, so we can actually take some Mephiston red and drag that along a little bit on the edges as well, why not? Right, same thing on the bottom here. Everything on the inside of that arm is going to show up red. And this will help greatly later on when we start applying blood for the blood god all over it. Now, all of that is done, and I'm noticing that this part of the glove has become a little bit white and blue in the process, so I'm going to take a little bit of brown and we're going to fix that problem. Right, so as for shading, we are going to get Seraphim Sepia for the yellow. We're going to get some Nuln Oil for the metal, and also the Seraphim Sepia will be used on the elbow patch. The Nuln Oil will also be used for the blue armor. But for now, let's just begin doing this. That's a little bit too much maybe, so let's get rid of a little bit. Soak away some of that excess. There we go. Put it on the rim of the shoulder pad. Elbow pad, I guess. And then we're going to use a little bit more. And we're going to wash that all over the yellow sword. Making sure, of course, that it stays around the ribbons a little bit as well, or the rivets, I guess, a little bit. Now this is a very quick and easy job. Not a big deal, really. Going to hold this upside down for a moment so we can access this lower part as well. Alright, that's it for the Seraphim Sepia. I doesn't mind if, or it's not really worrisome if this becomes a little bit messy, because of course these gene sealers come crawling through the ground. Now I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade first for the leather of the arm and the wrist guard, or the sword grip I mean. Putting that all over that little area. Don't need a lot, but we just need some definition there, a sense of depth, where the fingers are, where the grip is, and so on. And it does help with the feeling of that this is actually leather. Now there is a little bit of iron over here on the thing, but we're going to do that with the Agrax Earthshade as well. Just because we can, and like I said, these guys come from underground usually, so it makes sense if it has like a brown dull color. Now we're going to move on to Nuln Oil, and we're going to do all the metal parts. And this is a very quick and easy job, so I'm not putting a cut in here, because this will be done in seconds. Of course we just need a little bit of that shadowy definition where the teeth meet the center of the blade. Gonna have some oil up there as well, in the center, along the wrist guard, or not the wrist guard. I keep mixing up my word because English is not my first language. Yeah, little bit of Nuln Oil, basically on all the metal parts. Alright, and then I also said we are going to use it on all the blue cloth of the Gene Sealer armor. And I guess at this point it doesn't really matter, we might as well do the red with it as well. So that is exactly what we're going to do. We're just going to do all of it in one fell swoop, so that this is now completely shaded and almost ready for edge highlighting, I guess. Alright, now I didn't remember doing the teeth on the other side, so that's what we're going to do. Alright, so that part is now done. I think I'm going to give things a little bit longer to dry, and then I think we can then start moving on to edge highlighting the fur. Actually, never mind that. I thought of another job that we can do in the meantime while we're waiting for everything else to dry, and that is working more on the base. And with that I'm going to start using Stirland mud, which I will use this little landscaping tool with, or for, I guess. So this doesn't really need to be shaken, but I'm just going to shake it a little bit so that we have some of that mud or material on the lid. Now I'm just going to scoop it up, put it on the base, and I'm going to start spreading it around and working it into all the little areas between the rocks. And I'm going to do that for every model, and then I'll be right back. Alright, with the Stirland mud applied, we can move on to dry brushing the wolf, because it is finally dry enough. Now I think what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 stages of dry brushing. We are going to start off on the top with dry brushing a little bit of Steel Legion drab. A little bit further down, actually we're going to do this on the black or the darkest part and the part under that. Then we're going to take Baneblade brown. We're going to start dry brushing that along the middle section onto the Ushabti bone part a little bit, I think. And then we're going to get Ushabti bone and we're going to start dry brushing that on the underside and the legs and so on. But probably leaving this area a little bit darker, like all the fur parts. So yeah, let's get some of this Steel Legion drab, give it a good shake. Now you might notice that the Stirland mud is still wet in parts, so yeah, we're not going to touch that for a while, but after that is dry we are going to shade that with Agrax Earthshade a little bit, and that is going to take roughly an hour to dry again. So it's not a fast process, but I told myself I'm going to finish this project today, and I'm going to hold myself to that promise. Alright, so when dry brushing you can see these things are raised up a little bit, so we're going to follow that side, dry brushing along the way. Now luckily for us this is a pretty fast process. We're also going to start dry brushing the head. As you can see, that works out quite nicely. Brings back some color back to that face, makes everything a little bit less dark, and the lines a little bit less sudden as they change. Yeah, so I'm going to continue doing this along all the wolves, roughly about to this part, I think, because that is already the color that we had before we started shading. So I think we're going to go over that again, because of course the shade has made it darker. This is going to brighten the tops back up a little bit. We're just going to continue along the way. The tail, again, you can see the material goes downwards like this, not sideways. So it is a perfect place to go and do a sideways brush. Alright, we might do an extreme edge highlight at some point as well, with maybe Baneblade brown along the very tops there. Anyway, I'm going to continue doing this. I'll see you guys in a bit. Alright, so I finished dry brushing the Steel Legion drab, and you might already be able to tell that the dark spine of the wolf is already blending into the rest of the color of the fur. And that's exactly what we want. We want there to be the dark up there, and then it's going to get brighter further down. And the basic idea, what I wanted to explain a little bit better, is that basically I'm going to take the color that I'm dry brushing is going to be the one below the color that I'm actually using. So more specifically, the spine was done with Rhinox hide. Below Rhinox hide we use Steel Legion drab. So I'm going to dry brush the Rhinox hide with the Steel Legion drab. I'm going to dry brush the Steel Legion drab with the Baneblade brown, which was underneath that, and I'm going to dry brush the Baneblade brown with Ushabti bone. And I have someone at the door, so excuse me. Alright, well, it's time to move on to the next thing, and that is Baneblade brown. Again, quick dry brush. Not a huge part this time around, because it's just like a small little layer that we have to do. But of course we are going to have to do all 5 wolves all at the same time. And again, we just work until the brush almost is completely dry and doesn't have wet paint on it anymore. Just going to grab that wolf and we're just going to start dry brushing along that fur. Up and down a little bit, doesn't matter too much. We can blend in a little bit with the rest of the things that we already dry brushed. Again, like I said, this is a small area, so doesn't really matter. This is just very quickly, small part maybe along the face a little bit would also be a good idea. We need to define those features a little bit more. Now we're going to work on the face a little bit more later, because I have some things in mind for it. But first I'm going to continue doing all 5 wolves with a quick dry brush of Baneblade Brown. Alright, that dry brush is now also complete and we're going to move on to Ushabti Bone. Now after that I was thinking, we have fur that is in the color of Ushabti Bone, but the legs don't really have fur on them, and it would be nice to differentiate them a little bit. And if we're going to dry brush all of that in the same color, which would be Ushabti Bone, you don't really get the differentiation there. So I was thinking we need a lighter color afterwards, and for that I decided to start using Palette Witch Flash. But that's what we're going to do after. First we're going to get the Ushabti Bone. We're going to give it a good shake. Right. Oh, almost dropped my brush there. Right, get a little bit of that paint. And we will work it in amongst all the bristles until there's very little left. And once again, we're going to start dry brushing. Very lightly, because I noticed there is still quite a bit of paint left on the brush. Or at least that's a little bit wet. Now we can also do very light dry brushes of the colors above, so that we achieve this blend that I was talking about earlier, which I really want to have. And again, we're going to take the ear this time around, and the whiskers, a little bit of the mouth, very, very lightly. Right. And we'll continue along all the models like this. Alright, so the last part of the dry brush of the fur and the legs will be with Palette Witch Flash, like I said. So yeah, this should be a very extremely light dry brush, because it's quite a bit lighter than the Ushabti Bone. And we're going to keep it mostly on the legs, so that it has a little bit of a difference compared to the fur. So I'm just going to continue working around the model a little bit like this, very carefully, very gently. And I will probably also, this already looks a little bit weird, the underbelly also needs to be done, so that it's a little bit coherent. We're going to keep all the fur parts like the yellowish color, and then the legs should be a little bit whiter, but not too white. This might already be a bit too much, I'm not entirely sure. Or at least maybe I will be able to blend it in a little bit better. This is going to be a little bit of a tricky stage, I think. Anyway, I'm going to continue dry brushing this and all the 5 models, and you'll see me in just a moment and we'll have a look at the results. Alright, so all the dry brushing is now complete and I think the result looks quite nice. For the next part we are going to paint the gums in the mouth of the wolves, and for that we are going to use Pink Horror. So again, we're going to give the pot a good shake, we're going to thin down the paint, And for this I'm using my Artificer layer brush, the really small one, because the areas that we now have to reach are indeed quite small. I'm going to be a little bit concentrated, so you might not see it entirely well on the camera, but basically just above the teeth there is a little bit of the gums sticking out. And that is exactly what we're going to paint now. Very sparingly, with just a little bit of paint, so as not to overload the model with it. So that would overwhelm everything quite fast. Now, this is a very precise job, but I think you can already see it a little bit. And that is what we're going to do now. Alright, so I'm going to continue on, and actually I might also try to do the roof of the mouth, which is also going to be pinkish. And there's actually one other wolf that has an open mouth, which is this one, so we're going to paint that as well. The tongue is going to be pink, the rest is probably going to be red, and everyone else has pretty much closed teeth, closed mouths. But we are going to have to paint the teeth at the next stage. For now I'm going to focus on this, so I'll see you guys in a moment. Alright, with the gums now finished, I'm going to move on to a little bit of Mephiston red for the inside of the mouths. And then we're probably going to use non-oil to shade it, to make it darker. I might even take a little bit of Abaddon black and put that in the back of the throat, just to make it look like there's actually like a throat hole there, you know, for lack of a better word. Yeah, we have to be a little bit more careful now. I'm going to take a different model because this one is a nice example of what we're doing here. But basically the roof of the mouth, the back of the throat, the inside of the mouth, basically I'm going to start making it red. I already made a small mistake there with some red touching the side of the mouth. This is a little bit of a tricky thing to do, actually. And then I haven't decided on the color of the teeth yet, because by now we have used Ushabti bone for the fur, so that is what I usually use for teeth. But I don't think that's going to work out too well. So maybe palette witch flesh might be a good choice there. Anyway, I'm going to finish the roofs of the mouth wherever it is necessary, and then I will be right back. Alright, well, I've decided to shade the mouth with Carroburg Crimson, because that is a red shade and I think it would work well. And I'm just curious to see the end result when I use it, because I do want to keep the mouth a little bit red, but it should be dark on the inside. So let's see if the result is like I would hope. Like, I don't want to put non-oil on the tongue, because I think that would make it too dark, probably. Anyway, I'm going to continue putting Carroburg Crimson on the gums of all the wolves. Sorry if you couldn't see that, I didn't really pay attention, I'm just very carefully applying the shade. Anyway, see you guys in a sec. Alright, while that is drying, I want to work on the eyes a little bit. And to start off, I think we're going to start with getting a little bit of, let's see, I had a good one of ceramite white, yeah. So we're going to get a little bit of ceramite white, we're going to put that on the eyes. Now the eyes are quite small, right, but I think we will put a little bit of white on there, and then the sockets, the eye sockets, we are going to make those black. And on the most raised parts we're going to make those a little bit bluish, not blue, but, well, we have Thunderhawk blue, which is what you usually use to highlight black, and I think that would work quite well. So we're going to have like very dark eye sockets with like a little bit of Thunderhawk blue under there, and I think that's going to look quite awesome. It's also kind of what they have on the box art. You can see that these guys have quite dark eyes, and that there's like a little hint of blue on the underside of it. So I want to try to do the same thing, and as well at the same time with the black we're going to start making the noses black, which are also going to get a highlight with probably Dark Reaper and a little bit of Thunderhawk blue at the upmost edge. But we'll see. And I apologize if this video is becoming quite long again, but yeah, this is kind of my curse. Anyway, I'm going to start making the eyes white. And again, right now it doesn't really make much of a difference if I overspill on the sides, because the sides are going to be made black. Nevertheless, we're going to of course be as careful as possible. I hope you guys can see that alright. Right, that already looks weird, but we're going to fix that a little bit later on. The eyes are always the hardest part, and a little bit annoying to paint. That is a lot better. Alright, I'm going to continue doing this. Alright, moving on from the eyes, it is time to take a little bit of Abaddon black, and we will do the nose and the eye sockets. And again, as always, shake the pot, take a little bit of paint, thin it down. Should be gospel by now. Right. Not a lot is going to be black on this miniature, but we are going to start with the nose, which is quite identifiable, so that's good. The other side really quickly. Alright, and then as for the eye sockets, we are going to pick out a small area right around the eyes. Now this is also a good opportunity, of course, to fix any mistakes we may have made with the white. Which is always easy to do, because painting eyes on any miniature is kind of like the bane of my existence. I always manage to fuck it up, and I always end up being unhappy with what I did. Now I'm going to look at the reference box for a moment. Yeah, it pretty much goes all around the eye. Yeah, alright. I'm going to continue doing this, and I'll see you guys in a moment. Okay. Moving on from that, we are going to take a little bit of Dark Reaper, followed by a little bit of Thunderhawk Blue. And with those we are going to highlight the nose, and we're going to do an extreme highlight of the nose, as well as the eye sockets. Just taking a little bit more than what I have on the brush right here. Need to thin it down a little bit more than I have already. Now, I don't want to have too much on my brush, so what I have right now for mixing I'm going to shake off, and I'm only going to have a little bit on there. Now from there we are going to highlight the nose. Ever so slightly. Right, that's it. I'm going to continue doing this, and then we are going to be right back. Alright, moving on from that again, we are switching to Thunderhawk Blue. And we are going to use that to give an extreme highlight to the nose, basically just the corners, and we are going to go underneath the eyes, and we are going to draw a little line there. And again, I don't want to have too much paint in my brush, so whatever is on there from mixing, I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to have a very small amount and I'm going to use that to basically dot the edges. Now I'm taking these models to an extreme that most people will not do, and yeah, this video is probably taking a bit longer than I thought it would take. Alright, so very subtle. We're going to draw a small little line along the bottom there. Help draw attention to that eye and also break up the color a little bit. Now I'm going to continue doing this for all the models, and I will see you guys in a moment. Now, as for the eye colors themselves, I think we're going to go with a little bit of Gulliman Blue. Now this is a glaze, so it doesn't work in the same way as the other paints that we have used so far, but we can use it straight from the pot. And basically it's almost like a wash. It draws into the recesses of the eye, and it's going to leave a little bit of white in the center of the eye, basically. Now these eyes might be a little bit too small even for that, but let's check it out. Would be kind of nice because we have the Thunderhawk blue at the bottom of the eyes. So by making these eyeballs a little bit blue, it's almost like these glow a little bit, or that they have this little, I don't know, they're kind of like menacing, I guess. Seeing those eyes coming from the dark, and then these guys have quite angry faces, which I really like. But we should not use too much, because if it's completely blue, that's a little bit boring. It needs to be a little bit white in the center. Anyway, I'm going to continue doing this, and I'll see you guys in a second. Now, before moving on, the eyes are now finished. We could start working on the teeth, but I think by now the Sterling mud has dried enough that we can shade it, and that also requires some time to fully dry. And because of that, I think it's better to do that now while we're working on other things. And at any rate, the eyes, or the teeth, will not take very long to do, because that is pretty much the last thing that we have to do on the body of the wolves. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's just like one paint, some shade, highlight, and then the teeth will be finished as well. So I'm just really quickly slapping on some of this Agrax Earth shade onto all the Sterling mud that we've done. And I'll see you guys in a bit. Alright, while that is drying, we are moving back to Pellet Witch Flesh. And we are going to use that on the teeth. After that is done, then we will shade them, and we will apply some more Pellet Witch Flesh as a highlight, I think. After that we will dry brush the base in two colors, and the reason for that is just for added depth. After that we are going to apply Valhallan Blizzard, which is snow, and after that, actually no, before the Valhallan Blizzard we are going to apply some plants, vegetation, and so on. Anyway, I'm going to continue doing this. I'll see you guys in a second. Alright, we'll then continue with a quick wash of Seraphim Sepia on the teeth. After that is dry, we are going to come back with a little bit of the Pellet Witch Flesh for a quick highlight on the teeth. I'll just quickly do this. I'll see you guys in a second. Actually, I've decided to let the teeth as they are with just the Seraphim Sepia on them, because they still are pretty white, but they're not pearly white, which is, well, kind of feels appropriate. So I think we actually reached a pretty decent result using those. If you look at this guy, looks pretty damn good. So we're going to leave that as it is. Meanwhile though, we're still waiting for the shade to dry, so we cannot start dry brushing and gluing on grass yet. So we can focus a little bit on the chainsword, which also needs highlights, and I was going to make some red slashes, like horizontal things. So I think we're going to focus on that for a moment, and I think that will look nice. So just taking a little bit of Mephiston red again. Basically though, the wolves are now finished. So if this is what you came for to this video, basically it's done. We're just doing highlights on the arm, which is, you know, the one that only I have because I customized it. I'm going to add some blood for the blood god. I'm going to do the stripes on this thing. I'm going to do the basing. So all in all, this will still be a fairly long video. Anyway, not too much paint on the brush, and let's see if I can actually manage to do some decent long stripes. Like that. Right, I'm going to continue doing that all along the blade, and I'll see you guys in a second. We're going to edge highlight that with a little bit of Evil Sun Scarlet. And as always, good shake, thin it down. I don't need a lot, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to draw little lines on the edges of the red, not the right, but the red stripes that I just made. So very carefully we're going to go on the outside there. Hopefully you can see it. We're going to draw little lines like so. Finally, we're edge highlighting the yellow with some Ushapti bone. And this is not the neatest work in the world, but it's kind of hard to draw straight lines on such small areas and with trembling hands to boot. Anyway, I'm just going to do little parts along the edges. Like so. Alright, see you guys in a bit. Alright, we're going to get some Runefang steel for the guard and for the blade. Again, good shake, very important with the metallics, especially. And this is just going to be a little, very small highlight. Again, just on the outer edges, so that it will catch a little bit of extra light and the attention of anyone that might come and see this model. So basically at the edge of all the teeth. Making them look that little bit extra sharper. And of course we are going to go along the side of the guard. As well as these sides, which is important because these would also catch light. But we don't need to do the underside. That's the thing, because the underside of the blade would not actually catch the light. And so also here, little highlights very carefully. And that little circle, the little stud, activation stud, I guess. And now this is done as well. Now the last thing that we need to do on the wolf in terms of painting is to edge highlight some of the glove. And for that we will use Calgar Blue. So again, good shake. Oh, actually we should also highlight the glove. Never mind. Right now I'm just focused on pretty colors, things that break up the tone of the wolf a little bit. You know, like the bright chain sword, this little glove that we are going to do little parts on the edges. Well, that's a little bit of a smudge, we can fix that. And at any rate, most of this is going to get covered under blood anyway, but it's still nice to kind of do it ahead of time in case that part will not become bloody after all for some reason. This is just a very, very quick job. This doesn't have to be very precise, but it does make a difference if somebody goes in for a closer inspection. Alright, so finally in the end we are only in need of one more color for the highlights, which was... and I lost it. I'll be right back. Baneblade Brown. That's it. We're also going to use that for highlighting the ground later on. Actually, I think that's pretty close to being dry as well, so we're going to continue on with that very soon. But first let's finish the glove, so that we know that absolutely everything on this model is now highlighted. Right, so we have the little edge of the glove, which is higher than the rest, which would catch a little bit more light. Of course, we have all the fingers that we can do to create a little bit more of an interest point, and we can also create some depth. For example, on the thumb here, make the fingers a little bit brighter than the handle that they're holding, and in that way you can get a bit of a difference in there. Right, that's it. This is now done. Now, let me prepare. Alright, so time for the basing. Like I said, we are going to be using Baneblade Brown. I'm getting my little dry brush, because we do still need to be a little bit careful. And as before, just going to grab a little bit of it, work it into the bristles until there is very little left. But for the first one it doesn't really matter, we just need to go in a little bit carefully. And we just start dragging the brush along the dirt. And you will see right away it starts to catch the highlights, all the outer edges of the dirt. So now we're just going to continue on like this across all the 5 models, and I'll see you guys in a second. We're going to follow that up with a quick, very light dry brush of Zandri dust, just for that little bit of extra depth. Even though we're going to add snow and plants, so you're probably not going to see too much of it in the end, it's still nice to know that there's, at least for me, that there's a little bit more depth in there than you might at first notice. And like I said, this is going to be a very quick, easy, very light dry brush. Mostly at little parts where the mud is sticking out more than in other parts, so that you get a little bit of a difference there. I'm going to continue doing this, and I'll see you guys in just a moment. Alright, we're getting very close to the finish line. Everything is dry brushed, everything is painted. Now it's time for the finishing touches, and for that we are going to add some tufts of grass. I've got here the Citadel tufts of grass. And yeah, we're basically just going to glue some of those on. If I can get this damn box open. Alright, there we go. Now these are very nice and they break up a base quite nicely, even more so when you add the snow. Now to glue them on, I've got this Cider something, which is a specific glue for gluing rocks. It's also what I use for the rocks on the base. So now all that is left to do is picking out what kind of tufts we want to use and gluing them on. Now this one has a lot of rock all over the place, so we could use a small patch over in the corner. Maybe this one would be nice. Now this is sticky and it's a little bit frustrating sometimes. Hey. So in the end I'm going to use my tweezers and I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the bottom of this thing, and we're simply going to press it into place. Like so. It's already a little bit sticky, but not sticky enough to actually fit or to stick. So now, let me just make some space. I'm going to put this by the rocks underneath his feet, I think. It's already a little bit annoying. I need to use my hands a little bit. There's already a little bit glue on that. It's white, but like I said, we're going to add snow, and the white is actually going to disappear quite a bit. I just need to push it into place underneath by the side of the rocks there, which I think will be a nice place. And we're simply going to continue like this, adding little bits of grass wherever I feel like it would be a nice place. Now we do have to press it into position. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to continue doing this and I'll see you guys in a moment. Well, the day is almost ending, but I said I would finish this today. It was my personal challenge. And we are almost done. All that is left to do is put some snow on the base and then put some blood for the blood god around the mouths of some of these wolves. But specifically this one. Anyway, we're going to start with some Valhalla Blizzards. Now again, I'm just going to shake the pot just to get the material to the top, not because I really have to. And it looks quite thick, but it does work quite well as a snow. That is specifically what it was made for. We're just going to put some around the base, spreading it around a little bit, putting it into the plants as well, which is something I like to do because it doesn't make sense to not have snow in the plants when there's snow all around on the floor or on the ground. And that is something, it actually does work quite well. You can stick it into the blades of the grass, it will dry up there, it will stay put. Of course you shouldn't be touching it too much, but you know, for general use, and especially if you're just looking at your models, if you're just painting and not playing the game, like I have been so far, it works quite well. Just a little bit of grass in the tufts of grass just really works wonders. Now, and for the rest, I'm just using the small side of this brush. It's not a brush, but the tool, landscaping tool, I guess. I'm not sure. I'm just carefully putting this around the base. Also, we should have some on the rocks, of course. Working it into the edges and different places. Now we do need to be careful that we don't put it absolutely everywhere. You can do it too much. And of course we didn't do the dry brushing just to obscure everything with tons of snow. Anyway, I'm going to continue doing this around the base, and I'll see you guys in a second. Alright, so now we've got some snow on all the bases, and it makes quite a difference. It really feels like these guys are from Fenris now, and before they were just kind of like on a, I don't know, just a random world in the mud. But now, they're home. Anyway, it's time to apply the last touch, and that is some blood for the blood god. Now this really does need to be shaken well. If you don't use this for a while, it starts to not degrade, but it starts to really detach itself into two separate pieces. You will see like a yellowish layer coming into existence, basically. And you can of course just shake it up and everything will be fine, but yeah. Anyway, I have my medium layer brush, and I'm just going to take some blood for the blood god, and we can use this straight from the pot, and we will start putting this all around the wound. And again, this is slightly translucent, and this is where it really helps to have already painted some of this stuff red. And of course we are just going to go around the mouth and paint a little bit of blood all over the place, because of course this guy has just attacked someone. And well, he ripped an arm off, so this is very important to have some blood everywhere. As you can see, this makes quite a difference. This thing looks absolutely brutal now with this sword in his bloody mouth. It just got ripped off. Now I want to do the same thing for some of these other wolves. I was thinking about this one first of all because he is kind of crouching and it looks like he has already attacked someone. And I would like to add on to that a little bit. I'm just going to work my way around his mouth. Also the tongue. Kind of in a random pattern, but this will dry up being shiny and it looks really, really cool. These guys look bloodthirsty now. Maybe even have another one, because this one also looks really cool, as it's running and it's jumping around the corner because you see something else and now it's coming for you. You know, it locked onto its target and now you're absolutely fucked when it reaches you. To really drive that point home, I'm not going to do it for all the wolves, but for this one as well, I think it will be really, really cool to have some blood there. Right, so I'm just working my way around the mouth. Really driving home the fact that this guy bit someone. I'm very happy with how these turned out, actually. Alright, so what about up around the nose maybe a little bit as well? Yeah. That looks really cool. Alright. I think we're pretty much done here. Now the one last thing that I might do is a little bit of blood spatter. And the best way to do that is by creating a little bit of a stage for myself. So I'm going to move my other space wolves out of the way. And this one is going to have a bit of a special treatment. And I'm going to create a little wall with two of my water cups, as you can see. And in front of that, I'm going to put down a shoebox lid so that I have a protected area. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some of this, yeah, I think this brush is okay. Yeah, should be okay. Anyway, I'm going to move this a little bit closer to myself, and I'm going to get a dollop of blood for the blood god on there. And I'm just going to be flicking this around the model a little bit. That will create some blood spatter, hopefully. Maybe a tighter brush would be better, but you can really tell that this looks like blood. Anyway, I'm going to get a different brush and I'm going to finish off these models, and we will have a look at the finished result.